Hello, Virgo. Welcome back to Henry's Sacred Tarot. I hope you're doing well, my friend. Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me today. As always, this is a general reading, so take what feels right and leave what doesn't. Now, Virgo, I have to be honest. The moment I started pulling these cards, it felt like somebody has been carrying feelings they never really found the words to express. And the longer they've stayed silent, the heavier those feelings seem to become. So, let's see where this story wants to go. The first thing that catches my attention is how present you seem to be in this person's mind. Not in an obsessive way, not in a dramatic way. It's quieter than that. Softer. Almost like a song that keeps finding its way back into someone's thoughts, no matter how many times they try to focus on something else. I keep seeing someone going about their normal day, answering emails, driving home, sitting in traffic, folding laundry, doing all the little things people do to keep life moving forward. Yet, somehow, your energy keeps slipping into the spaces between those moments. And honestly, I don't think they're expecting it. Because every time they think they've finally shifted their attention elsewhere, something reminds them of you. A phrase, a song, a certain kind of smile, even a random conversation with someone else. It's almost strange to them how often your presence appears without invitation. The star is sitting here on the table, and I can't stop looking at it. Not because it's demanding attention. Actually, it's doing the opposite. It's sitting there quietly, steady, unbothered. And somehow that's exactly how this person experiences you. There is something about your energy that feels consistent to them, even when they don't hear from you, even when you're not around, even when life gets busy. The impression you left behind doesn't seem to fade as quickly as they expected. Okay, this is interesting, because the Six of Cups keeps pulling my attention next. And what I'm feeling here isn't necessarily about the past itself. It's about the details, the little things, the moments most people forget. This person remembers conversations that probably didn't seem important at the time. They remember things you said in passing. They remember your reactions, your sense of humor, the way you looked away when you were thinking, the way you expressed an opinion that nobody else in the room had considered. It's almost like they collect pieces of you without realizing they're doing it. And then later, when they're alone, those pieces come back. Not because they're trying to analyze you, not because they're trying to solve some mystery, but because something about the way you move through the world continues to stay with them. You know, I keep hearing this energy of admiration. Not idealization, admiration. There's a difference, because admiration usually comes from observation. And I feel like this person has spent a lot of time observing. They watch how you handle situations. They notice how you respond when things don't go your way. They notice the way you treat people, especially people who have nothing to offer you in return. And I think that's part of what keeps pulling them back. Virgo, I don't think they're only attracted to how you look. I think they're attracted to how you think. The Ace of Cups is sitting here, and every time I glance at it, I get this feeling that emotions have been growing quietly beneath the surface, not exploding, not demanding attention, growing, like rainwater slowly filling a reservoir, and maybe that's why they haven't said much. Because some people need time to understand what they're feeling before they can speak about it, especially if what they're feeling is deeper than they expected. Honestly, I think this person started out believing you were simply interesting. Then they realized they enjoyed talking to you. Then they found themselves wondering what you were doing. Then they started comparing other people to you. And somewhere along the way, the situation became much more meaningful than they intended. The Queen of Pentacles feels important here too, because whenever I look at her, I get this sense that this person views you as someone who brings calm into a room. Not because you're trying to, not because you're performing. It's just something they notice. You may not even realize how much comfort your presence creates for other people. But this person notices. They notice how people relax around you. They notice how conversations seem easier. They notice how even difficult situations somehow feel less chaotic when you're involved. And I think that's part of the reason they keep returning to thoughts of you. Life feels noisy. Life feels uncertain. Life feels complicated. But when they think about you, there is a feeling of steadiness, a feeling that things don't need to be rushed, a feeling that not everything has to be figured out immediately. And lately, I get the sense that they've been thinking about that more often than they admit, more often than they would probably tell their friends. Because if someone asks them directly whether Virgo has been on their mind, I can almost see them smiling and changing the subject. Not because the answer is no, but because the answer might be much bigger than they're ready to explain. And as I sit here looking at these cards, I can't help noticing that their attention doesn't seem to be drifting away. If anything, It feels like they're becoming more aware of just how much space you've been occupying in their thoughts. And what they're beginning to realize about those feelings may be leading them somewhere they weren't originally planning to go, because the energy starts shifting when somebody stops asking themselves whether they're interested and starts asking themselves why this connection feels different from everything they've experienced before. And honestly, Virgo, that's where I feel this person has been spending a lot of their time lately. Not necessarily talking about it, not necessarily showing it, just sitting with it, trying to understand it. The Hierophant keeps catching my eye. And what feels important here is that this person seems to be questioning beliefs they've carried for a very long time. Beliefs about relationships, beliefs about commitment, beliefs about what actually matters when choosing who deserves a place in their life. You know, some people move through life collecting experiences. Some people chase excitement. Some people chase chemistry. Some people chase whatever feels good in the moment. But I keep feeling like this person is beginning to realize that those things don't always create something lasting. And that's where Virgo enters the picture. Because something about you seems to challenge the way they normally evaluate people. Maybe they expected attraction to be enough. Maybe they expected passion to be enough. Maybe they thought compatibility was simply about enjoying someone's company. But you seem to have introduced a different question into their mind. What happens when you meet someone whose values actually matter to you? What happens when you respect somebody? What happens when you admire the way they move through life? Okay, that feels important, because admiration can be uncomfortable, especially for people who are used to keeping emotional distance. I have to be honest, I don't think this person expected to learn anything about themselves through you. Yet that's exactly what appears to be happening. The Hermit is sitting here quietly, and the energy around it feels incredibly reflective. It's almost like they've been reviewing parts of their own life, looking back at old choices, old relationships, old patterns, not with regret, just with a deeper level of awareness. And I keep hearing this question repeating itself in their mind. What am I actually looking for? Not what sounds impressive, not what looks good from the outside, not what other people approve of. What do I genuinely want? And somehow every road seems to keep leading back toward Virgo. Because the more they think about your presence, the more they recognize qualities that feel increasingly rare: patience, integrity, consistency, self-respect, a sense of purpose. Things that often get overlooked until someone realizes how difficult they are to find. Honestly, there is something almost humbling about this energy, because I don't feel like Virgo is trying to convince anyone of anything. I don't see you standing on a stage demanding recognition. I don't see you trying to prove your worth. If anything, I see someone simply living their life. And that's exactly what keeps affecting this person. The fact that you don't seem obsessed with being chosen. The fact that your value doesn't appear to depend on external validation. The fact that your attention feels earned rather than freely available. That changes something inside them. Temperance is here too. And every time I look at it, I feel this gradual adjustment taking place. Not a dramatic transformation. Not an overnight realization. More like somebody slowly recalibrating. Like somebody discovering that there are healthier ways to approach connection. Healthier ways to approach love. Healthier ways to approach themselves. Because I think Virgo has shown them something they didn't fully understand before. That stability can be attractive. That calm can be attractive. That emotional maturity can be attractive. For some people, those qualities sound boring until they experience the peace that comes with them. And once they do, it's difficult to forget. You know, this person may have spent years believing they needed excitement at all costs. Constant stimulation, constant unpredictability, constant intensity. Yet the more they think about you, the more they seem drawn towards something different, something quieter, something real, something that doesn't require endless chaos in order to feel alive. The King of Pentacles is sitting here, and what keeps coming through is respect, deep respect. Not the kind people talk about publicly, the private kind, the kind that shows up when nobody is watching. The kind that causes somebody to take another person's opinion seriously. The kind that makes them ask themselves whether they're becoming the version of themselves they actually want to be. Because I don't think Virgo inspires this person through words alone. I think your example speaks louder than anything you've ever said. The way you carry yourself, the standards you maintain, the choices you make when nobody is keeping score. Those things seem to have left an impression. And lately, I feel like this person has been measuring themselves against that impression. Not in a negative way, not out of insecurity. More because they're beginning to see possibilities they hadn't considered before. Possibilities for growth. Possibilities for partnership. possibilities for building something meaningful rather than temporary. And there's this subtle realization happening underneath everything else. A realization that meaningful connections often require more than feelings, more than attraction, more than timing. They require presence, effort, character. And I think that's exactly why this person has become quieter lately. Because some reflections cannot happen in a crowded room. Some questions require solitude. Some answers only arrive after a person sits alone with their own thoughts for a while. What fascinates me is that the more they reflect, the less they seem focused on what Virgo can offer them. And the more focused they become on what they can offer Virgo. And that shift feels like the beginning of something important. Because the moment somebody starts asking how they can show up differently, everything about the story begins to change. Something else begins to emerge the longer I sit with these cards, and it feels less like somebody chasing answers and more like somebody carefully studying a landscape before taking a single step forward. The Page of Swords is resting here, and I keep getting this image of a person standing at a distance, paying attention to things most people would overlook. Not because they're suspicious, not because they're trying to find flaws. It's almost the opposite. They're trying to understand who Virgo really is beneath first impressions. Because I don't think this person trusts surface-level information anymore. They've learned that people often present one version of themselves to the world and keep another version hidden underneath. And for whatever reason, they don't want to make assumptions about you. Okay, that feels important, because assumptions would be easier. They could create a story about who you are and move on. But they haven't done that. Instead, they've been collecting observations, tiny pieces, moments that don't seem significant on their own. The way you react under pressure, the way you handle disappointment, the way you speak about your goals, the way you talk about people when those people aren't present. You know, it's funny, because I keep hearing this energy of curiosity. Not curiosity about what you own, not curiosity about your status, not curiosity about appearances. This person seems fascinated by what motivates you, what drives you to keep going, what keeps you focused when life becomes complicated, what kind of future you're trying to create for yourself. And honestly, I think some of the answers have surprised them. Because the deeper they look, the more they realize Virgo doesn't fit neatly into any category. You may appear reserved at times, practical at times, independent at times. Yet every time they think they've figured you out, they discover another layer, another perspective, another side of you that wasn't immediately obvious. The Hermit appears again here, but the feeling around it is different, much quieter, much deeper. Almost like this person is beginning to understand that knowing someone takes time, real time. Not weeks, not quick conversations, not chemistry alone. And I think they're respecting that process more than they ever have before. Honestly, I don't feel rushed energy here. I don't feel somebody trying to force their way into your life. I feel somebody slowing down, watching, learning, trying to determine whether they can truly meet you where you are. Because one thing keeps coming through very strongly. They don't want to approach Virgo as the version of themselves they've outgrown. They don't want to show up carrying old habits, old fears, old confusion. And maybe that's why progress has felt slower than expected. Because while they're trying to understand you, they're also trying to understand themselves. The Seven of Pentacles keeps drawing my attention toward patience, not passive waiting, intentional waiting. The kind of waiting that happens when somebody realizes certain things cannot be rushed. I keep seeing this person questioning whether they're actually prepared for what they want, not whether they desire it, prepared for it. There's a difference. Because desire is easy. Preparation requires honesty. Preparation requires self-awareness. Preparation requires looking at areas of life that still need attention. And I think they've been doing exactly that. Looking at finances. Looking at responsibilities. Looking at emotional patterns. Looking at whether their actions match their intentions. Because the more they learn about Virgo, the more they seem to understand that words alone won't impress you. Promises won't impress you. Potential won't impress you. And strangely enough, they respect that. They may even admire it, because it forces them to become more honest with themselves. I have to be honest. There's a moment I keep seeing over and over again. This person imagines a conversation with you. Not a dramatic conversation, not some movie scene, just a real conversation. And in that moment, they realize they want to have something meaningful to offer. Not just feelings, not just attraction. Something real, something they can stand behind. And that realization seems to have changed the way they approach everything. Strength is sitting here, and the energy feels incredibly mature. Not loud, not aggressive, not performative. The kind of strength that appears when somebody chooses patience over impulse, reflection over reaction, growth over ego. Because there may have been a version of this person who would have rushed ahead simply because they wanted something. There may have been a version of this person who expected feelings alone to solve everything. But that's not the energy I'm seeing. The energy I'm seeing is someone learning restraint, learning accountability, learning that caring about another person sometimes means taking extra time to make sure you're showing up in the right way. And Virgo, I don't think they fully expected this journey to affect them as deeply as it has. What began as curiosity seems to have become something much more personal. Because every answer they find about you somehow reflects another question back toward themselves. Who am I becoming? What kind of partner would I be? What kind of future am I building? What kind of life am I creating? And those questions have a way of changing people, especially when they stop running from the answers. You know, there are moments when I feel this person looking toward the future and trying to picture where they fit inside it, not in a fantasy, not in an illusion, in a practical way, a grounded way. And every time they attempt to imagine that future, Virgo keeps appearing somewhere within the image, not demanding attention, not taking over the picture, simply existing there as someone important, someone whose presence matters, someone whose opinion matters, someone whose respect matters, which is why I don't think their focus is entirely on understanding you anymore. A portion of their attention seems to be shifting toward another question altogether, and that question may end up becoming far more significant than anything they've asked themselves so far. A shift happens here that feels impossible to ignore, not because it's loud, not because somebody suddenly bursts through the door confessing everything they've ever felt. It's quieter than that, more internal, more personal, almost like a light slowly turning on inside a room that has been dark for a very long time. And honestly, Virgo, I think that's what makes this energy feel so powerful, because the change isn't happening around them, it's happening within them. The Death card is sitting here, and what I keep feeling is somebody becoming tired of carrying the same emotional habits they've carried for years. The same avoidance, the same excuses, the same tendency to push feelings aside and hope they'll eventually disappear on their own. You know, some emotions do fade with time. Some attachments naturally lose their intensity, but this doesn't feel like one of those situations. Because every attempt to move past it seems to have brought them right back to the same place, right back to the same questions, right back to the same person. And eventually, there comes a moment when somebody has to stop asking why something won't leave their mind and start asking what it's trying to teach them. Okay, that feels important. Because I don't think this person is fighting their feelings the way they once did. I think they're beginning to listen to them, not blindly, not impulsively, just honestly. For perhaps the first time in a long time, judgment is here, and the atmosphere around it feels incredibly reflective. Like somebody standing in front of a mirror and seeing themselves clearly. Not the version they present to other people. Not the version they wish they were, the real version. The one that exists underneath all the distractions. And I have to be honest, I think some realizations have been difficult, because when somebody stops running from the truth, they often discover things they weren't prepared to acknowledge. Maybe they cared sooner than they admitted. Maybe they recognized your value before they allowed themselves to say it out loud. Maybe they spent so much time analyzing their emotions that they forgot to actually experience them. Whatever the case may be, there is a feeling of clarity emerging. A clarity that wasn't available before. I keep seeing someone replaying conversations. Not because they're trapped in the past. Because they're seeing those moments differently now. Words that once seemed ordinary suddenly feel meaningful. Interactions that appeared casual suddenly reveal another layer. Even periods of silence begin to make more sense. And through all of it, Virgo remains present. Not as an obsession, not as a fantasy. As a person who somehow left a deeper impact than expected. The Wheel of Fortune keeps drawing my attention next, and every time I look at it, I feel movement, not rushed movement, not chaotic movement, the kind of movement that happens when somebody finally accepts that standing still is no longer helping them. Because I think they've reached a point where maintaining the old version of the story feels harder than allowing it to evolve. There is a strange awareness growing here. An awareness that life doesn't always offer endless opportunities to say what matters. That people don't always remain exactly where we left them. That meaningful connections deserve more care than simple assumptions. And this realization seems to be pushing them forward little by little. Honestly, what surprises me most is how differently they view Virgo now compared to before. Because at one point, they may have believed someone else could eventually come along. Someone similar, someone easier, someone who would create the same feeling. Yet the more time passes, the more they seem to realize that comparison doesn't really work. Not because Virgo is perfect, nobody is, but because what affected them wasn't one specific trait. It was the combination, the way you think, the way you approach life, the way you communicate, the way you remain grounded while still holding depth, the way you manage to be practical and thoughtful at the same time. And those qualities together create something that feels difficult to replicate. The world appears here, and what I keep sensing is completion, not the end of the story, the end of confusion, the end of pretending not to know what they feel, the end of searching everywhere else for answers that have been sitting directly in front of them. Because sometimes understanding arrives gradually, and sometimes it arrives all at once, like a puzzle finally locking into place. Like looking at a picture you've seen 100 times and suddenly noticing something you somehow missed before. You know, there is almost a sense of relief around this energy. Relief that they no longer need to argue with themselves. Relief that they no longer need to create reasons why this connection should matter less than it does. Relief that they can finally acknowledge what their heart has been trying to communicate. And what fascinates me is that this awakening doesn't feel dramatic. It feels mature. Like somebody accepting responsibility for their own emotions instead of expecting circumstances to make decisions for them. The more I sit with these cards, the more I feel somebody stepping away from old fears. Fear of vulnerability, fear of disappointment, fear of being misunderstood. Those fears may still exist, but they don't seem to be controlling the situation anymore. Something stronger is beginning to take their place. Something steadier, something more intentional. And because of that, I keep getting the feeling that the questions occupying this person's mind are starting to change. They're no longer asking themselves whether these feelings are real. They're no longer asking themselves why Virgo continues to matter. A completely different question seems to be forming instead. And the answer to that question may end up influencing what happens next. What fascinates me about this energy is that it no longer feels like someone standing at a crossroads wondering which direction to take. It feels like somebody who has already made a decision internally and is slowly gathering the courage to act on it. And honestly, Virgo, those are two very different things because uncertainty has a certain texture to it. It hesitates, it circles, it keeps looking for more information. This energy feels different. It feels focused, quietly focused. The Eight of Wands is sitting here, and the atmosphere around it feels restless in the best possible way. Almost like somebody who has been rehearsing conversations in their head for far too long. You know what I mean? They've imagined different scenarios, different responses, different outcomes. They've played the whole thing out over and over again. What they would say, how they would say it, whether they should start with honesty, whether they should start with humor, whether they should pretend everything is casual or simply tell the truth. And lately, I get the sense that the distance between thinking and doing has started getting smaller, because there comes a moment when preparation stops being useful. There comes a moment when a person realizes that no amount of planning can replace an actual conversation. No amount of imagining can substitute for a real connection. And I think they're arriving at that realization. Okay, this feels important, because I don't see somebody wanting to communicate simply to ease their own conscience. I don't see somebody trying to unload emotions and disappear. I see somebody wanting to create something tangible, something that exists beyond thoughts and possibilities. The Two of Cups keeps drawing my attention, and every time I look at it, I get this feeling that they're becoming increasingly aware that connection is a two-way experience. It's not enough for them to know how they feel. It's not enough for them to understand their own emotions. They want to understand yours. They want to hear your perspective. They want to know what this experience has been like from your side. And honestly, I think that realization makes them nervous. Because once a conversation becomes real, uncertainty enters the room. People can surprise you. Life can surprise you. The future rarely follows a script, but despite that uncertainty, something keeps pulling them forward. I have to be honest, the fear doesn't seem to be stronger than the desire anymore. That feels significant, because for a long time, caution may have been winning. Analysis may have been winning. Distance may have been winning. Yet something has shifted, not dramatically, not overnight. Just enough for movement to begin. The Fool appears here, and what I keep sensing is somebody standing at the edge of a new chapter. Not because they know exactly how everything will unfold, because they don't. Nobody does. But because they've reached a point where remaining in the same place feels less comfortable than taking a chance. And Virgo, I think that's what makes this energy feel sincere. They're not moving because they have guarantees. They're moving despite not having them. They're not stepping forward because every question has been answered. They're stepping forward because some questions can only be answered through experience. I keep seeing this person becoming increasingly aware of how much time they've spent observing life instead of participating in it, watching opportunities, thinking about opportunities, evaluating opportunities, while something inside them quietly wished they would engage more fully. And when they think about you, I feel that awareness becoming stronger, because the possibility of connection doesn't feel theoretical anymore. It feels real. Real enough to matter, real enough to take seriously. The Wheel of Fortune shows up again, and this time it feels less like reflection and more like momentum. Like somebody sensing that life is moving, that circumstances are changing, that opportunities don't remain frozen forever. And there's something almost beautiful about the humility in this energy. Because they're no longer trying to control every outcome. They're no longer trying to predict every variable. They're beginning to understand that meaningful experiences often require a little faith, not blind faith, just enough trust to take the next step. Honestly, what keeps standing out to me is how much respect sits underneath these feelings. Because attraction alone creates urgency, admiration creates thoughtfulness, respect creates intention. And what I see here feels intentional. I see somebody wanting their actions to match their feelings, wanting their words to carry weight, wanting their presence to mean something. There's a difference between wanting attention and wanting connection. This person seems to be choosing connection, and that choice changes everything. Because once somebody starts thinking about building rather than wishing, their priorities begin to shift. Their focus begins to shift. Even their fears begin to shift. Instead of asking, what if this doesn't work? They start asking, what if I never try? Instead of wondering whether the timing is perfect, they begin wondering whether perfection was ever the point. And Virgo, I keep getting this image of someone sitting quietly by themselves, no distractions, no outside opinions, no noise, just their own thoughts. And in that silence, a simple realization keeps returning. The feelings aren't going away. The respect isn't going away. The curiosity isn't going away. If anything, those things seem to have become clearer with time. Which is why I feel like the story is becoming less about discovery and more about expression. Less about understanding and more about action. Because there's only so long a person can carry something meaningful before eventually wanting to share it. And as these cards settle in front of me, I can't help feeling that whatever has been building beneath the surface may not stay beneath the surface forever. And Virgo, something tells me this story may not be finished yet. For some of you, there may still be conversations waiting to happen, feelings waiting to be understood, and chapters that haven't fully revealed themselves. For now, just allow yourself to be where you are. There's no need to force anything, no need to rush ahead. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. I genuinely appreciate your time, your energy, and your presence here. If this reading resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Take good care of yourself, Virgo, and I'll be here when you're ready for the next story. Until then, bye for now.